All right, this is the Chapter 5 recap for the integumentary system. For this test, you get to use a sheet of paper single-sided as your note sheet. The integumentary system is the largest organ in your body and contains your cutaneous membrane, which is your skin, and accessory structures, which are nails, hair, and glands. The cutaneous membrane has two layers, the outer layer, which is the epidermis, and the lower layer, which is the dermis. We also discussed the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer. Technically, this layer isn't a part of the integumentary system, but we still discussed it in order to understand how it interacts with the integumentary system. The functions of the integumentary system are protection, excretion, it helps regulate our body temperature. The pigment melanin helps protect us from the sun. The protein keratin acts as a water repellent. Vitamin D synthesis, our body needs vitamin D for healthy bone development, and we get that vitamin D either from the sun or our food. It stores lipids, it detects any stimuli like touch and pressure, and it also plays a role in immunity. In your integumentary system, the most common type of cell is stratified squamous epithelium, and many of these cells are going to contain the protein keratin, which is made by cells called keratinocytes. Our integumentary system, our epidermis, is going to have different layers depending on where we find this skin. If the skin is on the palms of our hands or the soles of our feet, it has 5 layers, which we call thick skin. Everywhere else in your body, you only have 4 layers, which we call thin skin. So I would definitely, for your test, put your labeled drawing of the epidermis on, know each cell layer and what happens in each layer. Also with the epidermis, we went over perspiration, and there's 2 types of perspiration or sweating. There's sensible perspiration, which is produced by your active sweat glands. This is the sweat that you produce when you're being active, working out. This is a sweat that's also going to produce that kind of BO sweat smell. There's also insensible perspiration where you are sweating and you don't even know it. This sweat does not have that characteristic BO smell. I would also include your dermis drawing and labeling, know what happens in each spot, include all the accessory structures and what layer they're found in. With the dermis, we also talked about different types of injuries, that an abrasion is a scrape, a laceration is a cut, a contusion is a bruise, and a hematoma is a collection of blood outside of our blood vessels, so it looks like a pretty severe bruise. With the dermis, we also discussed dermatitis, which is just an inflammation of the papillary layer, that top layer of your dermis, it's going to cause irritation. It's going to be really itchy. You might have a rash, and the best example that we talked about was poison ivy. Your dermis is really strong because of the fibers found within it. It has collagen and elastic fibers, which help give it its strength. With the dermis, we talked about the pinch test to determine if someone was dehydrated. We talked about stretch marks when skin gets pushed past its limit. We talked about tretinoin or retin-A, which is used to treat wrinkles. And then we also looked at tension lines. And remember, with tension lines, those are the lines that surgeons want to cut along so healing is more efficient and it doesn't cause as much scarring. And then we looked at different types of receptors and cells within our dermis that allows us to feel and detect temperature or pain. Again, we looked at the subcutaneous layer. We just need to know that it's mostly fat. It's below the dermis. The dermis connects to the hypodermis. That's where we get a lot of our injections. And we talked about the 4 different types of injections. We also took a look at plastic surgery procedures. And then we went into skin pigmentation. What gives our skin its color? So one of the primary pigments we have is melanin. Melanin comes from melanocytes, which are found in our stratum basal. There's 2 types of melanin. There's phenomelanin, which is a red-yellow pigment, and then there's eumelanin, which is a more brown-black form. And it's important to remember that everyone has melanocytes, and it's just the amount of melanin being produced and our genetics that helps determine what our skin color is. People who suffer from albinism do not have any melanin produced. The second primary pigment is keratin. Keratin has a yellow-orange pigment to it. Dermal circulation, your blood flow also plays a big role in what your skin looks like. We know that our red blood cells carry oxygen and the red pigment hemoglobin. If your blood vessels are dilated or vasodilation, let's say you're really hot, your skin is going to see more red in that area. We're needing more blood flow because we're warm. The more blood, the redder we will look. If you have reduced blood supply or vasoconstriction, your skin is going to look a more palish or bluish color. The term for that is cyanosis. And then we took a look at different pigment conditions. We talked about how sunlight helps build our bones. I would definitely put your flow chart that we created off of this on your note sheet. UV radiation causes the cells in your dermis, or your epidermis, to create cholecalciferol or vitamin D. And then through that process, we're going to change it to our liver, which converts it into calcitrol. And then calcitrol is used by our small intestines, which allows us to absorb more calcium and phosphate from the foods we eat. And that calcium and phosphate gets added into our bones to help with their development. If you have too little vitamin D, you can get a disorder called rickets, where your bones are abnormally weak and they'll start to bend. We took a look at skin cancer, the different types of skin cancer, how to recognize it. And then we went into the second part of our integumentary system, our accessory structures. So we looked at hair, and we know the function of hair is to protect our skin. And we find hair everywhere except on our fingers, our toes, our lips, and portions of our genitalia. With hair terminology, I would be familiar with the parts of a hair. The follicle is where the hair gets produced. The root hair plexus is where the nerve is at the base of the hair follicle. That's we can feel if our hair is stuck or getting pulled. The erector pili muscle is the muscle that causes your hand to stand erect. That's the muscle that contracts and gives you goosebumps. Your hair root is the portion that anchors the hair to the skin, and the hair shaft is what you see when we're looking at someone's hair, the exposed portion. There's different types of hair. When you are going through embryonic development, you have lagunal hair that you'll shed before birth. You have terminal hair, which is the hair that's on your head and your body. You have vellus hair, which is that fine, soft peach fuzz hair. And then your club hairs are the hairs that fall out. Then we took a look at glands. You have different types of glands. You have sebaceous or oil glands that produce sebum. You have pseudoodiferous glands, which can be apocrine or eccrine. Apocrine glands produce sweat that's sticky and cloudy. This is going to be found in your armpits, around your nipples, in the pubic region. Apocrine pseudoodiferous glands are the glands that are going to produce your BO sweat. And then you have eccrine glands, or another term for them is merocrine glands, and they release sweat on your skin in high numbers. The sweat that's going to be on your palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. While it does produce a lot of sweat, it doesn't have that characteristic smell. And then you have mammary glands, which produce milk. Ceruniferous glands produce cerumen, which is earwax. With nails, I would also know the type, or I'm sorry, not the types, but the portions of the nail or the structures. You have the nail body. The nail body is the portion of the nail that we actually see. Below the body, you have your nail bed. You have the hyponicum, which is the portion that extends off the tip of your nail. You have the eponicum, which is your cuticle. Your cuticle is the skin that we find around our nail. And then you have the lunula, which is the little crescent white part that you have at the base of your nail. I would also be familiar with the inflammation response in your integumentary system, that after an injury or an irritation, the first step is inflammation. After the inflammation, you're going to have cell migration phase, and that cell migration is going to help form a scab. After cell migration, you're going to have that granulation tissue form. Remember that soft pink tissue we talked about in our tissues unit? That's under our scab. And then eventually your scab will fall off, And a scar or a keloid will be left if the injury was severe or deep enough. We also looked at burns, the different types of burns. A first-degree burn is very painful and red. Redness we call erythema. This is like if you were to touch a pan really quickly when it came out of the oven, or this happens a lot with curling irons where you accidentally touch your skin really quickly. A second-degree burn is still going to be pretty painful, but this one is also going to blister. And a third-degree burn, a lot of times people don't feel these because it's so deep that it burns their nerves. With this type of burn, this is what we'd have to get a skin graft to help heal. And then we looked at the difference between heat exhaustion and hypothermia. That's all for this unit. Next up, we'll look at the skeletal unit. Happy studying!